am Rhea Ripley.
This is my brutality!
It was WrestleMania 36, except it didn't feel like WrestleMania 36. Yeah, 70,000 fans became an empty arena. Night 2 opened with the up-and-coming Rhea Ripley, making history, becoming the first superstar to defend an NXT championship at WrestleMania, facing the 2020 Women's Royal Rumble winner and inarguably one of the wrestlers of her generation, Charlotte Flair. Whether or not the match delivered, that's kind of not the talking point we're going after here. After it was done, it was all about whether or not WWE did something for Rhea. Did she shine on the big stage that is Mania, even if there weren't fans there? Or having her lose to the most established woman in the history of the company? Did it really elevate her? Over 3 years later, we can safely say that she was not buried at all. Yes, all those fans that like to abuse the wrestling terminology of buried really need to kind of look at things now. In 2023, Rhea Ripley has emerged as one of the hottest and most talked about stars in all of the WWE, and rapidly growing a fandom that is out of the traditional circles that people think come to wrestling. But before we take a look at all of her success that she's experienced, let's go back and look at the journey that led to her incredible rise, the rise of Rhea Ripley. Ripley's road to wrestling stardom has been filled with record-breaking moments and some challenging triumphs, which you'll see soon enough. Her humble beginnings started in her hometown of Adelaide, Australia, where she got her break with Riot City Wrestling and then Melbourne City Wrestling, crossing paths with future WWE stars like Mercedes Martinez, Dakota Kai, and Toni Storm. It took her just shy of 3 years from her in-ring debut in 2014 to sign with WWE, where she competed as a relatively in-the-box white meat babyface before crashing out in the second round of the Mae Young Classic tournament. She dabbled in and out of WWE NXT while training in the Performance Center in Florida, before she turned heel as a villainous persona the second time around in the Mae Young Classic and established herself further, making a character, building something there that we now know, reaching the semifinals this time but getting knocked out by another future women's champion in Io Shirai. In 2018, WWE was establishing WWE NXT UK, a brand over in Europe to develop more future superstars. And Rhea's development was in the perfect position to prove even more of what she had, knocking it out of the park, proving that it was the right decision to make her the first ever NXT UK Women's Champion. And in doing so, she also became the first Australian woman to ever win a championship in WWE. And the second Australian behind her was her future fiancé, Buddy Murphy. The run in NXT UK was a pivotal one for her improvement, and it wasn't too surprising that only a year later she became the NXT UK Women's Champion that jumped over to NXT in Orlando, Florida, and this is where we really started to see the stature and power of Rhea Ripley come into its own, and matches that showed off her power. Once again, timing worked out perfectly. The pairing against Baszler was a really strong one for her to earn a fan favorite status, as WWE NXT jumped into brand warfare in a one-off Survivor Series where they were able to conquer over Raw and SmackDown, and Rhea Ripley was one of the direct benefits of that, beating Sasha Banks and Charlotte Flair in a triple threat match 2 days before Survivor Series, and then carrying her team to victory in what turned out to be a 2-on-4 handicap match at the first ever Women's War Games bout 1 day before Survivor Series. At Survivor Series itself, she got the winning pinfall for Team NXT, with herself, Io Shirai, and Candice LeRae being the survivors. Remember, all of this happened in just 3 days. And that's where we leap over to WrestleMania 36. Under those very odd circumstances, Charlotte Flair ended the NXT Women's title reign of Rhea Ripley. After a brief hiatus, she returned right back to the fold in the NXT Women's titles picture, with Io overcoming her and Flair to become the next NXT Women's Champion. Were we getting a slight detour from the domination we would get in the future with Rhea? Later that year, she was in the second Women's War Games match, but this time she found herself on the losing end as Team Shotzi fell to Team Candice. She was well and ready for her big spotlight by this point. She was ready for a call up. After losing to Raquel Rodriguez in a last women's standing match at New Year's Evil 2021, she went on to become the runner-up at that year's Women's Royal Rumble. So what were the WrestleMania plans going to be in 2021, and how could Rhea Ripley potentially jump from NXT up to the main roster and play a role? While initial plans reportedly had Lacey Evans defending the Raw Women's Championship against Charlotte Flair, her sudden pregnancy announcement forced WWE to scrap that plan altogether, meaning that then champion Asuka held the title heading into WrestleMania 37. There was some talk of Flair getting the challenging spot against Asuka, but her unfortunate diagnosis with COVID-19 meant that WWE had to make changes yet again to the women's title scene for that year's Mania. Rhea Ripley was once again in the right place at the right time and simply walked up to Asuka and got a WrestleMania match, beating the Empress of Tomorrow in her first event with a crowd in over a year. That had to feel good. It was her first title run on the main roster, but she was clearly still far from being the fully established, dominating female war princess that we see now on Raw. The handling of her first title reign was somewhat frustrating to watch, with her always being second fiddle to Charlotte Flair despite being the person who had the title. Charlotte Flair continued to be in the ruling class of WWE, ending Rhea's title reign just a few months after WrestleMania 37 at Money in the Bank, making it the second time that Ripley's momentum had been held up by the Queen herself. After failing to regain the title multiple times, she teamed up with Nikki ASH, a bright and bubbly superhero, next to Rhea Ripley's heavy metal dominating performance. It was an odd pairing, and they eventually became women's tag team champions together. 2 months after losing those titles, it was surprisingly Nikki ASH who turned on Rhea to end their partnership. Some people thought it would be the other way. With no clear plan in place for Ripley in early 2022, she had an impressive 30-minute long performance at the Royal Rumble before a very random partnership with Liv Morgan was put together. WWE would have even more bodies in the ring for a fatal 4-way tag team title match at WrestleMania 38. Ripley and Morgan didn't capture the titles at Mania, and it didn't take long for the Eradicator to truly come into her own and turn on Liv Morgan. I don't need you, I wear leather. I'm a bad girl who does bad girl things. The next chapter of her career turned out to be one that was truly her style. Yes, the Judgment Day. At WrestleMania Backlash, she helped Edge defeat AJ Styles to link up with Damian Priest and the Rated R Superstars' new faction that was all about shaking up the WWE. Her role turned out to be a lot more important than even WWE may have initially anticipated. She turned out to be the de facto enforcer, the muscle at ringside, with everyone saying, "This is just like when China was the female enforcer for DX in the 1990s. Yeah, we weren't the only ones who thought that. As soon as she joined the JD, Rhea quietly became the most protected and pushed woman on the WWE roster. After kicking Edge out of the group and Finn Balor sliding into that same role, the Judgment Day began to pick up some serious momentum. The only thing that accelerated the purple and black attack was when Dominic Mysterio, yes, the prodigal son of Rey Mysterio turning on his father, needed some new friends to be a bad influence. He turned out to be the final piece of the puzzle for this faction of action. Rhea's on-screen relationship with Dominic on Raw turned out to be an instant recipe for success for those watching on TV and those losing their minds with the retweets, with Rhea getting a lot of love and Dominic getting a lot of hate. I think that's kind of the idea, right? Her dominance in 2022 saw her win all 7 of her 8 singles matches on Raw, only losing to Liv Morgan just once. It was by the turn of 2023, when WWE decided that she was ready to have the women's division built around her. Yes, leading her to a Royal Rumble victory. But her Royal Rumble victory, like a lot of Royal Rumble victories, stacked up the numbers. She became the first woman to win the Rumble from the #1 spot, and also held the record along with the runner-up Liv Morgan for the longest time ever spent in a women's Rumble match, clocking in at 1 hour, 1 minute, and 8 seconds. Before she took care of championship business, she continued her feud with Edge and Beth Phoenix, which was a pretty unique one, losing to the couple when she teamed with Finn Balor at Elimination Chamber 2023. After that, she wanted to rid herself of the demons of the past, so she challenged the woman who had the biggest obstacles in her career so far. Yeah, we're back to Charlotte Flair. And what turned out to be a rather poetic and incredible performance in Los Angeles at WrestleMania 39. Rhea wrestled the longest and possibly best match of her career, defeating Flair clean in the middle to become the SmackDown Women's Champion. We've been talking quite a lot about all of her accomplishments over the years, but none of those cemented her as the top woman in WWE the way her win over Charlotte did. They had one of the best matches over the 2 nights of this past WrestleMania. That was Rhea. That was Charlotte. That was 2 figures intertwined in their passion for doing it at the top level. And although WWE could have handled her championship reign a lot better the first time around, and the newly created Women's World Championship is still something fresh, she has continued to get bigger and bigger reactions as her highly insulated character on screen with boyfriend Dominic is just a hit. They're hated, they're despised, and if you like them, you still love to see people hate them. There's no doubt that Rhea Ripley sneering to millions of people on screen around the world has captivated the imagination of wrestling fans in the glow, the fog of all the disdain that is the Judgment Day. And there's no doubt that when her time with Judgment Day is done, Rhea Ripley will be one of the top stars in the company. Seems like WWE has always had an eye on Ripley as a future big name, and she's an example of how they perfectly built a new, relatively out-of-the-box, white meat babyface off the plane from Australia to become one of the biggest stars in the business. We mentioned timing is a lot of things, and it's certainly a big part of her rise. The big changes happen at the right time. But WWE rarely ever dropped the ball with Rhea Ripley, or Rhea herself didn't let it go. Speaking of Dominic, check out our video on how ex-con Dom became the most hated man in the WWE. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Sportskeeda Wrestling.